Hello everyone, today we are doing a EDH deck tech for one of my favorite cards, which is Zozu the Punisher, which I saw and thought, wow, this would make a great mono red prison / group slug commander. And I knew I had to build it. Also, I'm aware that Tulare Community College did one of these before with Zozu the Punisher. I actually didn't watch that until after I'd finished this deck and was looking around to see what other ideas people had. But this does run some of the same cards. I think the only two cards that I got from that video was Crucible of Worlds, because that's a really smart idea because of all the land wraths we have. And then also Stranglehold, which is right here. What Stranglehold does is essentially it blocks tutor abilities stuff, and it shuts down extra turns, which I think is great. And we don't want searching libraries to happen, even if they're fetching and stuff. So they play that land, and that land is useless. They take 2 from Zozu. But, so up here is our land destruction pile. We have Ruination, Price of Glory, Devastation, a bunch of other stuff. We have the classic Stone Rain, Apocalypse, Boom Bust, Impending Disaster, and then, of course, we have to have Strip Mine. So land destruction, this basically just our opponents, they play lands, they take damage, and then we take away their lands, so they just burn themselves, essentially. And this is really fun for me, for the person who's playing this deck, not for the other people. It's worth saying I do not recommend building this deck, at all. I proxied this deck and then took cards I actually owned. I owned a Fury in Spanish, that's why it's in Spanish. I owned a Soul Ring, of course, I think most do. I owned Tybalt, Blood Moon, Magus of the Moon. I own a lot of these cards, Lightning Bolt, stuff like that. I actually do own an Eidolon, but it's in my burn deck for Modern. But I do not recommend spending this much money. And if you are going to spend money on this deck, one thing, do not buy Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. Just replace it with a Wasteland, okay? Because Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, the only reason I included it is because I'm proxying this deck. It's $4,000, and it's really good in the prison pile, but it's not worth buying unless you already own one. Then that's great. If you already own one, you probably have plenty of decks already, though. Next pile is the burn pile. So we have cards like Sulfuric Vortex. It burns people at their upkeep. It also shuts down life gain, notably, which is super useful, especially if people are trying to gain a lot of life. The nice thing about EDH is that if you have a specific playgroup, you can edit this deck to your heart's content to make it worse for your playgroup. But this is just imagining situation. We also have Eidolon of the Great Revel, which will probably burn us a lot too, but it's included in Modern Burn, where it burns us a lot in Modern Burn too. We don't care about our life total, whereas others might. And if we're dealing more constant damage, we're going to kill fast. And another thing is that this deck doesn't exactly try to win. It just tries to make the game unbearable. Sometimes it even loses itself. We have the classic 2-card thing with Furnace of Wrath and Heartless Hidetsugu. Basically, you tap it. Anyone who's playing these 2 cards just wants to OTK everyone with even life totals, and that's essentially what it does. But yeah, and then we also have Curse of Bloodletting. We also have just classic Ankh of Mishra, which just does the exact same thing. We have Lightning Bolt, Price of Progress, because we're playing almost all basics, except for Shinka, Tabernacle, Valakut, which is awesome in this deck, and Strip Mine. We also have mana barbs, which is painful. Burning Earth is a lot less mean. It only works for non-basics. So, if you don't know mana barbs, whenever a player taps a land for mana, deals 1 damage to that player, it's a classic group slug card that tends to be not too fun. Burning Earth just does the exact same thing, but with non-basics. And I don't know if you've noticed, but in Commander, people tend to play a lot of non-basics. This deck does not play a lot of non-basics, so I actually considered not including mana barbs, but I figured it was worth it, so I did. And then, of course, Valakut, because we're running a lot of mountains and it burns people, especially if we have a bunch of these enchantments, it'll help a lot. We have Blasphemous Act and Vandal Blast. Not a lot of removal, but presumably our board wipes and some of our burn spells will also work, like our Bolt. Vandal Blast, these are basically just like Commander staples that we essentially need. Crucible of Worlds. If we're land wrathing ourselves a lot, we're going to really want some way to use recursion to get these lands back, because we don't want to be also screwed over on mana. We want to be able to stop that. We're running a Soul Ring and a Heart of Ramos and Mana Geyser, because that gives us a lot of extra mana to cast a lot of our high mana stuff. Now, the next pile is our Prison pile, my favorite part of this deck. So I like Mono Red Prison a lot. But it's not that nice of a deck. That's honestly okay with me. But if you want to play this, your opponents might not be happy. They really might not be happy, and I think that's why I don't recommend building this deck, unless you don't care. Personally, if I did own a Tabernacle and did want to spend this much money on decks, I would. But I spend my money on modern decks, and I proxy my Commander decks. Okay, so first off, we have Karn the Great Creator. A lot of people play artifacts that do stuff in Commander, and this card shuts that down. It can make other stuff artifacts. It's just absolutely brutal in Modern and Commander alike, and a lot of other formats. War's Toll. Basically, they might not have a lot of lands. This makes it so when they tap one land, they tap them all. And basically it makes them go all in when they attack. Winter Orb, probably one of the most hated cards ever. I think it's at the top of the salt list on EDH rack. Means you can't untap I think one land during your untap step. Crawl Space. So Crawl Space and cards like that, including Ensnaring Bridge, are essentially essential, because the moment we are playing this deck, people will target us, and they will try to kill us. So we need stuff to stop them from killing us. So stuff like Crawl Space, which means they can only swing in with 2 creatures each combat. Stuff like Ensnaring Bridge. We might not have a lot of cards in our hand because we cast a lot of stuff. So basically that shuts down attackers. And then of course we have Trinisphere, Tectonic Instability, stuff like that. Null Rod also does the Karn effect. Tibalt and Stigma Lasher, along with the other card. Where is it? Oh yeah, Sulfuric Vortex. They shut down life gain, which is nice. And then also we have our Blood Moons, our Magus of the Moons, which will basically not affect us at all, except for maybe our Tabernacle. Luckily, if we do not want that Tabernacle anymore, the nice thing is we're running 10 creatures in this entire 100-card deck. But if we don't want it anymore, we can always just destroy it with a land, because we have a lot of land destruction. or land destroy it, yeah. We have Fiery Emancipation, Curse of Bloodletting, Dictate of the Twin Gods, Fury, which is just damage, and Heartless Hitetsugu, which taps. These were my damage spells. These 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, those all do the exact same, not the exact same thing, but they're similar. They're all damage doublers, or in Fiery Emancipation's case, triplers, which are helpful. Over here, we have just some weird cards that are kind of fun, even though they're high on the EDH Rec Salt list. Illicit Auction basically makes people bid life totals to gain control of creatures. Very fun. I like it. Thieves Auction. You set aside all cards in play. Starting with you, each player chooses what it. Essentially, you switch around who owns what. The nice thing about our board is that a lot of these cards affect everyone, and it won't matter if another player controls a Blood Moon, if you know what I mean. Here are our wheel effects. We have Wheel of Fortune and, of course, Magus of the Wheel. These can just re-roll us hands, especially if we're playing a lot of cards and we need, some more draw. A lot of times I've found I've had 0 cards in my hand and I've just been able to draw 7 new cards. 3 mana, draw 7. Let's see. Vandal, we already covered that. Mana Geyser, yeah. And then here is our final part. We have a lot of mountains. We're also running Shinka because even though it's not basic, there's only one. And with the bonus of First Strike, it seems worth it. Tabernacle makes people basically pay an upkeep cost to keep their creatures when we're running 10, which isn't that relevant. Valakut, really probably one of the best lands in this deck. It allows us to burn our opponents a lot because we're playing a lot of basic mountains. And then Strip Mine. I'm not running the actual Wasteland, but highly recommended. Basically, the only way to make this deck even remotely cheap is to remove the Tabernacle. And if you're actually building this deck and not just proxying it at FedEx like I did, just replace the Tabernacle with a Wasteland. It's really worth it, and unless you already own a Tabernacle. But even then, you might want to replace a mountain with a Wasteland. Also recommended to add in a Ruby Medallion. I didn't add in one, but I think it's worth it. And anyway, that's the deck tech. Thanks for watching. Mono Red Prison with Zozu. See you in the next video.